So Bernie apologized. Let's just start with this. There's a piece by Zephyr Teachout. I think everybody's familiar with Zephyr Teachout. She ran for Congress in the 19th district, not this past cycle, but the cycle before. I should even say, let's start before that. She ran against Andrew Cuomo in what was, by all accounts, just a way to take a piece out of him. I mean, I don't think anybody when the campaign launched thought that she would have a chance of beating him. Mm-hmm. Although, she got like 35% if memory serves correct in the primary. And
she ran as an anti-corruption person because Andrew Cuomo shut down the Anti-Corruption Commission. The
Moreland Commission.
Which was investigating him.
And so Cuomo shut that down. But she's a law professor. This is like campaign finance is basically her jam, as it were. And she wrote a piece in The Guardian called Middle Class, quotes, Joe has a corruption problem. It makes him a weak candidate. And there's nothing, this is not the only part about it that's controversial in any way is whether this makes him a weak candidate.
Right.
That's, it's an opinion piece. I happen to think it does. But the idea of like calling this out as being such a horrific thing to do is odd, the way that people responded to this, because she's not trying to gin it up. Now, supposedly, Paul Krugman said, like, how could you do this before the impeachment trial? Well, we're 2 weeks out from Iowa.
Yeah.
And this is when this stuff should be aired and does get aired. But there's nothing new about this assessment of Joe Biden. I mean, just because Donald Trump tried to dig this stuff up in Ukraine, that's not where this stuff came from.
Right.
This stuff was pre-existing, and that's why they were looking for that.
And out in the open, nonetheless.
Out in the open. In fact, let's go back to 2000, and this is back in 2008. Right. I think in the fall of 2008, right? Is that right? Or is this, and this lefty, huge lefty who has this big left-wing talk show that he was hosting at the time, he was interim, called Meet the Press. And a guy named Tom Brokaw brought this up 8 years ago.
Those of his son Hunter, who is 38 years old, and that's a reference to your son being hired right out of law school by a big company here in Delaware that is in the credit card business, MBNA. He got about $100,000 a year, as I recall. You received $214,000 in campaign contributions from the company and from its employees. At the same time, you were fighting for a bankruptcy bill that MBNA really wanted to get passed through the Senate, making it much tougher for everyone to file bankruptcy. Senator Obama was opposed to the bill. Among other things, you couldn't, in fact, claim that you had a problem because of big medical bills. You voted against an amendment that would call for a warning on predatory lending. You also called for, you opposed efforts to strengthen the protection of people in bankruptcy. This has been an issue that you've heard about before. Your son was working for the company at the same time. In retrospect, wasn't it inappropriate for someone like you in the middle of all this to have your son collecting money from this big credit card company while you were on the floor protecting its interest?
Absolutely not. My son graduated from Yale Law School. The starting salary in Wall Street is $140,000 a year if he went to lawyer. Options he had. He came home to work for a bank. Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. All right, now, look, I don't want to get like, I don't, $100,000 in Delaware versus $140,000 in New York City. I'll take the $100,000 in Delaware, but that's not the point. The point isn't even that Joe Biden was doing what he was doing because his son was working there.
Right.
The point is they're so intermeshed. This is the world that he's swimming in.
it's called a conflict of interest. Maybe he skipped that class at Yale Law School.
It's a conflict of interest, but it also is just indicative of like how tight the relationship is between the money. Look, back in at least 2008, maybe before that, he was referred to as the senator from MBNA.
Right.
I mean, this is not new stuff. And the idea that people are treating it as if it's like this creation of Bernie Sanders. No, and I got news for you folks. If Sam Seder can find that on Twitter, Donald Trump's campaign is going to find Tom Brokaw on Twitter saying that thing too.
You know, something to keep in mind here that I don't think has been expressed enough, and maybe instead of using the word corruption, which from Zephyr Teachout has a different meaning than from Twitter, right?
Right.
She's a corruption expert. She wrote a book on corruption.
She's talking about systemic corruption of our democracy.
Exactly. Yeah. So keeping that all in mind, this is the senator who, with that bankruptcy bill, you know, this is 2008. This is right before the financial collapse, right? Or right around that time. This bankruptcy bill led to over 100,000 foreclosures per month to this day, continuously, 100,000 plus foreclosures per month. That was a bill that he advocated for, that was looped in with all these credit card, and that's where the empire lies. I mean, Delaware is credit card empire. Yep. And so, his argument could be, I'm representing the interests of my community, like Cory Booker was with pharmaceutical companies or whatever, all of the, weapons manufacturers. This is my district. But at the end of the day, this guy has 30 years of a record. And, I think what's driving me crazy about the Democrats right now, the establishment Democrats, capital D Democrats and their consultants and everybody who's online, is that it's not just an attack. It's that they don't like that Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump have the same message. And so they're trying to loop them together. Well, if Donald Trump says it, then, Bernie's in line with Trump. And it's really cheap. I've seen a lot of it online with very sophisticated, smart consultants who have, are contributors to CNN. And ultimately, it's to silence Bernie. And so I think, my opinion is I don't think Bernie should have apologized. I think that, if you're going to call him corrupt, everyone's got to be on the same message. And you have to explain why he's corrupt and make it very clear so that everybody from a Twitter follower to your co-chairs of your campaign have that message handy so they can rebut. And I think the issue is that there wasn't a coherent message across the campaign. And, they were scrambling. And reporters online were saying this. What's the right answer? Joy Gray, the press secretary for Bernie Sanders, went on with Katie Tur on MSNBC the other day, and she said, "Well, what is it? You're not standing. Is he corrupt or is he not corrupt?" That's what Katie Tur was saying, and she did a great job responding in light of the fact that the campaign did not have a message. Right.
I mean, I think there is one of the things about I think the campaign is that there is an ethos, particularly this year, this will go round, in terms of the way that they're doing organizing.
Right.
There's an ethos of empowering and disaggregating sort of the power and allowing people to freelance. Mm-hmm. So you get like that talking point with Elizabeth Warren is disseminated without having to go all the way up the chain, but not necessarily down. It's not just one person writing it, mm-hmm. and that's and this is it's a live by the sword, die by the sword type of situation. Because the flip side of that is, and David Dayen has a piece up about this right now. For instance, when Bernie is in the Senate with Klobuchar and Warren,
that's right.
Because of the impeachment hearings, at some level he has the advantage because of the organization that he has built, or mm-hmm. theoretically, right? Like, I mean, this has been my feelings for 6 to 8 months, is that Iowa is going to be a big test. At the end of the day, this stuff, I'm sorry, it doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. If Sanders is able, his entire theory, not just of his campaign, but of his governance, is based upon this idea that I'm going to activate, or I'm going to get low propensity voters to engage in the system. I'm going to give them reasons to believe that their issue sets, which they agree with me, I'm going to make them feel like they're empowered, which is going to bring them out. They're going to vote, they're going to caucus or whatnot. And then they're also going to hit the streets or do whatever it takes to help me get my agenda across. Iowa is the proof of concept. If he can't do it in Iowa, there's little reason to believe that he can do it other places. Right. But if we see Iowa come in, and that's why, like, when, John calls in about these polls, like, so what? Because I don't think if this is working properly, it's not the idea that two polls are showing that in the aggregate, Biden has a 3-point lead in Iowa is not going to mean anything. Yeah. In fact, it's going to work to his benefit, because if Bernie's theory is correct, and if they've been able to execute it, then the number in which he wins in Iowa is going to go beyond what any poll predicted he would. Right? Because these are voters who the models would assume would not be participating, almost definitionally, right? That's the nature, low propensity voters. And so it's going to be fascinating to see how this goes. I think, personally, I don't have that much. I'm sort of agnostic about the sorry thing. I mean,
I have, the other side of this is, and looking at it from possibly the establishment strategy. So we're going into impeachment. Senators cannot comment for hours during the impeachment. They're taking they're leaving their phones out. They're not allowed to talk, which, senators not talking is crazy. They love airtime. So Bernie's going to have to be silent. And as we're going into impeachment, and he's going to be sitting there in this trial, the movement, which doesn't have one message, which has been picked apart by the establishment, and they've been gearing up this Bernie Bro 2.0, especially with Hillary Clinton today coming out and attacking Bernie. I think what they're trying to do, starting with Warren, moving into Biden being attacked, and look at how divisive we are, into Hillary Clinton, coming back up and saying that, Bernie's bad for the party, he's not a Democrat, whatever, the same crap she always says, is they're trying to solidify that anti-Bernie support, right, and move it into Warren land. But also for people who are on the fence, who may have forgotten about 2016, to see, oh, right, he is divisive. And I don't like to see these fights play out. And, maybe I'm just going to go with the person who claims to be the unifying force. Now, if I were Bernie's campaign, I would be coming out ignoring what Hillary said, and just saying, we are the only campaign that has a multiracial, multi-generational, working class and poor people's movement behind them. We have more small dollar donation than ever in the history of campaigns, and we have raised more money.
Well, that's why I tend to think that the apology is okay, because it's providing that type of air cover. It's basically saying, like, this is not going to inhibit what we're doing on the ground. I don't think that there are people who are going to be demoralized, who are in Iowa, excited to vote for Bernie, who are going to be like, he shouldn't have apologized to Joe Biden. If anything, what you get out of it is you get another 24-hour cycle, frankly, on the piece, the original piece. So that people are reading people are reading Zephyr Teachout's piece in the first place. And you'll notice that any criticism of this has nothing to, they never say the word Zephyr Teachout. No. They never do. It was because, David Sirota sent it around in an email blast. They talk about Sirota, but all he was doing was linking back to this piece that Zephyr Teachout wrote. But they'll never mention Zephyr Teachout. Now, Teachout is a surrogate. I mean, I don't think she's I don't know if she's a paid surrogate. I don't think so. Not paid. But she's a surrogate. I think, with the blessing of the campaign, but I don't know that she did that on their.
Just one more point, though. If something does happen, which probably will, given this news cycle right now, and Bernie is held up, who is going to calm the waters? He's had to step in to basically calm everything down with the last 5, 6, 7, 8 hits that he's gotten. I mean, today he said, just now, a reporter, I can't remember who it was, one of the reporters said, they asked Bernie about the Hillary comments, and he says, on a good day, my wife likes me, because Hillary said nobody likes Bernie Sanders.
Right.
So he has this way of just mostly neutralizing stories. And if he's not around, who's going to do that?
Right. I mean, they're going to take advantage of this. However, let me counterpoint. If I wanted to sort of say, like, how can I get our top surrogates, who are literally the most exciting politicians in the country right now. How can I get them to be all over Iowa,
Right.
sit back, take a couple of days to rest, but at crunch time, put in like, you know, my Michael Jordan, LeBron, whatever it is, and sit back, you know, and not have to travel as much. How could I possibly get away with doing that? The press would all be all over me.
Right.
Well, boom. I mean, because AOC is going to double her efforts in Iowa now because she has to. They're going to send down the squad. It's going to be all over Iowa. And she's the most exciting politician in the country.
Absolutely.
And so it's going to be fascinating to see the way this plays out. I mean, you know, just from that perspective. But I'm encouraged, but I think at the end of the day, it's just a question of whether they've been able to execute their fundamental. It's not just their fundamental campaign strategy. It's also their sort of like the fundamental raison d'etre, if you will, of the entire campaign of it being a movement. There is no difference between what they're doing now. Yeah. Well, there's some, but not much between what they're doing now and how they will intend to wield politics when they're in office. And that is the thing that distinguishes Sanders' campaign from the others. I mean, I think that.